ready to receive the word this morning? All right. This morning I need to speak to your hearts. This morning I need to speak to probably in any person the most little bit of rebellious person inside you. Right? I'm going to speak to that guy this morning. I'm going to teach to that guy this morning. And in order to do so, we're going to look at the story of the prodigal son. But we're not going to look at the part that you think we're going to look at. So you're welcome to page with me. We'll go in your U version with me to the book of Luke. Luke chapter 15. We all know the story of the prodigal son, right? It's been taught to us since we were this big in Sunday school, if you've grown up in the church. If you haven't, it's a cool story. It's a story about love. It's a story about redemption. It's a story about being lost and then being found again. But that's not my story this morning. But I need to just lay the foundation, so I'm going to do it, right? There was a son, or there were two sons and a father. It seems the father was a farmer shepherd type person who had, well, the Bible speaks of two sons, probably had more. And the one son said, Dad, it's time. I'm not living under your house anymore. I'm not living under your rule anymore. And we tend to think of it as that, right? But if we look at Jewish custom, what the sons actually said is, cut me off from who you are. Yeah. Right? In order for that son to say, I want my inheritance now, what the son is saying, you guys are dead to me. That's when you get inheritance, right? Right? Okay. So he told his dad, Dad, you guys are dead to me. I don't like it here. I don't want to be here. Give me my money. I'm going. By the way, it's not his money. It's actually still his father's money. But anyways, story pans out. He takes his riches, goes to a faraway land, the Bible says. That faraway land, he lives like there's no tomorrow. Right? Right? No money principles, no nothing, no have to work. Isn't it like, woo, lekker. Party every night, buy his wives, each one a new horse, Buy his one wife a 5 horsepower horse and his other wife a 3 horsepower horse and carriages and double story tents and there they go. Man, it's going lekker until he doesn't. We know the story. And when it, for a while, doesn't go that well, he starts to think about what he's done. He's still too proud, so he says, now I'm going to find work. And as the world, or maybe the Lord would have it, there's a famine, so work is scarce. So he says, maybe, I'll do some volunteer work, some pig volunteer work. Because at least when I do that, I can maybe eat something. Now understand this again. And this isn't my story. This is just for context. But it's so interesting. I have to just understand this again. For a Jewish person, and I would think he's a Jewish person, for a Jewish person to have anything to do with pigs or with pork, that's a no-no. That's a big no-no. So that is the desperation that this guy faces. To say, I'll go to probably an infidel, a non-Jew, because this guy has pigs. I would ask him if I could just watch over his pigs, and then once every week or day or whenever, when his own people comes and brings food for the pigs and just hoys it there, I will check if there's something for me to eat. And for me to be able to do that, my agreement with this person is that I will just make sure none of his pigs goes away. That's what I'll do. So that's where he finds himself. Man, that's horrible. That sucks. And maybe if that was my sermon today, that's where I would be drilling in. And that's where your life might have been in the past. Or maybe you know someone whose life is there right now. Or maybe your life is there right now. Not the story. So this guy decides, no. And he speaks to himself. He says, you know what? It is better, seeing that I'm cut off. I'm not a child of the house anymore. At least it would be better for me to be a slave by my father. So he's got nothing to lose. Come on, when you say that, you got nothing to lose, right? So he goes back to his father. On the other side, what he doesn't know is that each and every morning since the day he left, his father walked down the road. The Bible doesn't say how long the road was. But you need to know that it became a habit. Walked down the road, stood by the big road, and waited. Nothing would happen. In the evening, he'd go back. And the next morning, he would say, maybe my son will come back today. So he'll go out again. He'll stand by the road. Stand by the road. Nothing. Goes back. Maybe my son will come back again tomorrow. Goes by the road. Stands by the road. Nothing. And this goes on for a period of time. Until one day. One day, there in the distance, he sees someone. Just put yourself in his shoes quickly. He sees someone. He looks. He says, I know that face. I mean, hy's nie meer so chubby and dik nie, maar I know that face. The Bible says his dad runs to him. So if that was my sermon this morning, I could do a whole sermon on that as well. Not the sermon this morning. Runs to him, hugs him. He says, Dad, can I be a slave? Dad looks him up and down and says, what are you talking about? You're a son. Let's get you cleaned. Goes on, right? Let's redeem you. Let's restore you. If that was my sermon today. And let's feed you. Bring that calf. Right, now you're caught up. So this morning I'm talking about the other son. That's where we're going to start reading. So we're going to start at verse 21, if you're reading with me, or if you're following behind me, or in your own YouVersion of the Bible, 21. So the son said to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe, put it on him, put a ring on his finger, put sandals on his feet. Verse 23, and bring the fattened calf, kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead, and he's alive again. He was lost, and he's found. So they began to celebrate. Then verse 25, meanwhile, everybody say meanwhile quickly. Meanwhile, the oldest son was in the field. The oldest son was the good son, by our standards. The oldest son was the son that woke up early, that followed in the family business footsteps, that you never have to say something to him, that you never have to ask something, that when he was there, everything happened as it should. He was a good guy. So that older son, meanwhile, he was in the field. He was busy working. And when he came near the house, he heard music and he heard dancing. And he thought to himself, wait a minute. This ain't right. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. What I find interesting here is that this verse does not say he called his father and asked him what was going on. I don't want to read too much into it, but in my mind, I read a little bit of disconnecting. Calls one of the servants. Asks the servants, hey, what's happening? So the servant asked, or he asked the servant what was going on. Verse 27, your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. So the older brother became angry. Quickly say offense. Quickly say offended. The older brother became angry. He became offended. He took offense. And he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered, verse 29, his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you. It's a very interesting choice of words. I've been slaving for you. And never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. Let me draw you a picture quickly. I want you to just get this before we continue. I see a farawayness in relationship when I read this part. I infer, and I might be wrong in this, it's just me, but I infer when he came home, he heard something was going on. If and should he have been in good relationship, he would have gone to his dad. Yo, Dad, what's going on? He didn't. He went to one of the slaves. I further infer that he became angry for a reason, and he mentions it. He said, but I've been doing. Not I am, I do. I've been slaving. I've been doing this, this, and this. I've been doing all of this stuff, man. Yet, you never give to me. Now, the answer is quite interesting. Keep that distance in your mind. Read with me. So he answered the father, look, all these years, you never gave me even a young goat. But then, this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home and you kill the fattened calf for him. Do you see that he refers to himself as a slave and to his brother, who is not actually a son anymore, still as a son? Do you notice that? He says, this son of yours, who squandered everything you gave him, he comes home and you're not mad at him. You know, yesterday when I was tending the sheep, you were on my case because that one sheep didn't want to. Hello? You know, last week when I was out in the field with a maize, you moaned at me because the corn was going that way and you wanted it to go that way. You know, last week when I was slaving down for you and I did what I was supposed to do, you were on me because I was 5 minutes late. And I'm giving you guys examples, right? However, this guy goes out with half of our money, your money. He goes and wastes everything. Then he comes back and he's still your son. It's nice when we start to read the stuff in context, ain't it? And not just glance over it. It's nice when we make it part of our lives, right? Okay, he says, this guy, he comes back. And what do? You throw him a party. Listen to the answer, verse 31. My son, the father said, you are always with me. He says, hey boy, we're supposed to be close. You're always with me. You know, when I wake up in the morning, I see you there. We have our morning coffee. You're with me, right? We go for a walk in the field. Every now and again, you're with me. I actually went with you last week and we look at the crop of maize and I told you, you know what, if it was me, I would have done this. But you've done that and it's okay. You know what, I was waiting the other day for you and you were 5 or 10 minutes late and I wondered what was happening to you. And when you got there, I asked you, man, where were you? See how the same circumstance can mean two different things to two different people? He says, hey son, I'm always with you. You're with me. We're here. He says, you know most, but what I have is yours. What you have is mine. If you want to have a party, go for it. The house is open. Man, we got more. Take one. Take the naughty one. I'm adding flesh to this. Is that okay? Okay. He says, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad. Because this brother of yours was dead and he's alive again. He was lost and he's found. So I want to speak today to a very deep part of your mind, your soul, your being. I want to speak about offense and forgiveness. The title to my message would be, it is forgiveness that makes you free. See, the Bible here draws a distinction between two personalities, and the one does what he's supposed to, and the other squanders everything. The one is overwhelmed with love and excitement, the other one is overwhelmed with wisdom. He was offended. What we see here is a fact that is real, and that the offense that happened was very true and real and there. All the stuff that other we're faced with a lot of this happening in our own lives, much more often than we think. We carry offense and we carry unforgiveness with us. And we carry hurt with us that we were never supposed to carry. And this morning, there's a lot I can say about forgiveness, but I'm going to show you why forgiveness is important to a believing person even to an unbeliever, but I'm going to show you especially why. If you say you're a child of God and if you've given your heart, it's so important in a place of forgiveness. And then I'm going to give you one or two practical ways in which you can practice forgiveness. Yes, that's right. We practice forgiveness. We don't just forgive. One of the fallacies of forgiving is that we think that it's a once-off event that's supposed to happen here, pie in the sky, law, and then everything's just supposed to be good and be away. I'm here to tell you this morning that it's not how it works. I'm here to tell you this morning that some areas of forgiveness is probably going to be the hardest thing you do. But it's going to be the best thing that you can do for yourself. Let me start by what the Bible says. In fact, by what Jesus says. And you're welcome to read with me again, just briefly in Matthew chapter 18, verse 28 through 35. And it was so interesting, and I couldn't say anything on Thursday evening, but Thursday we actually discussed a little bit of that in Bible school with the guys there. And I had to bite my tongue because I couldn't say anything, but I wanted to leave till today. But have a read with me here. And again, just to give you context so that I don't have to read everything. Someone came to Jesus and asked Jesus, said, it was Peter, by the way. He said, Lord, must I forgive if someone does something against me? 7 times. Now you have to understand biblical or Jewish numerology. There's always meaning to when someone asks something, right? That is, man, the Jews speaks in code. When they say 7, it's just not the idea of 7, it's the idea of wholeness, because to the Jewish person, 7 is wholeness, right? Is finality. Earth was created in 6 days, 7th day was the day of rest. It's finality, it's rest. We can go into that forever. So Peter wanted to be clever. He says, if my brother does something to me, should I forgive him 7 times? And by inference, after time number 7, I've done it wholly as I should. So then I don't have a responsibility anymore. Now you understand Jesus' answer. So Jesus said, no, not 7, 70 times 7. So 70, by the way, is the repeatable number. So it means it never stops, right? So no, you're not going to forgive that person 7 times and then it's fulfilled. You're going to forgive him fulfilled times never ending. And then he used this example. He says, so there's a person who owes another person a lot of money. And that person takes him to court. He gets his summons or whatever the case may be. He's there, standing there. Judge says, what's going on here? He says, got no money. Nothing. Bloodsuck. And the judge forgives him. He says, okay, your debt is forgiven. What you've owned, what you've done wrong, what you've done stupid, and we've all done stupid things with money, so it's a good example, right? What we've done is forgiven. You are free to go. You don't owe anybody anything. Walk out of here, go in your own way, be blessed, have a nice day. Man, that's cool. So he does that. Leaves, goes, walks out. And as he walks out, he sees his chum. He's like, hey, you owe me 50 rand, man. Remember, he owed a heavy lot of money. This guy owes him like $50. He says, Etlavo, come here. Stand here. He says, where's my money? You know, pay back the money. Where's my money? He says, I don't have it. He says, oh, okay, come with me. He takes him. Stupid guy, but he takes him to the same judge. The judge tells him, weren't you just here? I mean, how dumb can you get and breathe? Right? Weren't you just here? Didn't I just forgive you of everything? And now you come here and you bring this poor guy here who owes you a fraction of what you owed. He owes you almost nothing, and now you want to... He says, no, that's not how it works. So that's where we pick up. Listen to this. So, but when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 silver coins. He grabbed him, he began to choke him. Pay back the money, he said. No, pay what you owe me, right? Pay what you owe me, he demanded. His fellow servant fell to his knees, begged him, be patient with me, I will pay it back. But he refused. Instead, he went off and he had the man thrown into prison until he could pay his debt. And when the other servants saw what happened, they were outraged. They went and told the master everything that has happened. Then the master called that servant in. You wicked servant, he said. I cancelled all the debt of yours because you begged me to. You wicked person. I forgave you. Now remember the context in which Jesus told this parable, right? He says, hey, the Father has forgiven you. Now you come. He says, shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? I know people sometimes do terrible stuff to other people. I am not belittling in any way or form what anyone might have done to you. Right? There are some evil people out there. There are some horrible people out there. Get this morning. But none of it, doesn't matter how evil or how horrible that might have been, none of it could ever compare to the price Jesus paid for your redemption. There isn't a price high enough that could ever be of the same value. You need to understand that this morning. There isn't a price high enough. The price that Jesus paid for you, for the Father to forgive you, will always be higher. No matter what the offense is to another person. And by the way, when I'm saying this to about 1% of our population that really has had experienced evil. The other 99%, you guys are the guys that are forever offended because a taxi drove in front of you. Or your friend didn't text you back. Or, man, I can go on forever. I'm talking about offense that is actually not even worth the sentence that comes out of your mouth. Doesn't even matter what emotional space it takes up in your mind, it is not supposed to. That's the other 99% I'm talking of. Right? Now, I'm going to read the next part, and you might say that can't be true. A loving God will not do this. And I will tell you, come speak to me, because it's in the Bible. It's not Old Testament. It is in the Bible. It is an example that Jesus uses that is still as relevant today as it was when Jesus spoke these words. This is what he says. So in anger, his master. In this story, who's the master? God the Father. You guys okay with it? In anger, his master handed him over to the jailers to be tortured. Oh, a loving God can't do that. No, I can't think or fathom that God would do anything like that to me. That is what we do, right? In being self-righteous and wanting to say, but you know, a God that loves can't be a God that will hand me over to tormentors. By the way, who's the tormentors that the Bible are talking about here? Demons. Demons. My Bible says, I forgive you. You don't forgive. The Father says, I'm handing you over to demons to torment you. Some people might be watching this, you might be listening to this, you might be sitting in this room. Stuff never goes right in your life. But if you have a look, you will see there's unforgiveness in your heart. And you wonder why it feels like you're being tormented. You're being tormented by demons that has a legal right in your life because you're stuck in unforgiveness. I have spoken to people that start to suffer from physical disease. There's a guy called James van der Kolk. He says you wear the scars of emotional stuff in your body. Go and read that book. The body wears the scars if you want to. I'm going to use an example, and I'm not saying it's medically relevant in all situations. I am saying, and I'm giving you a couple of examples, right? James van der Kolk agrees with the Bible. Man, the Bible is such an amazing book. It's still just as relevant as it was 20 or 2,000 years ago. Bible says God gives you over to tormentors, to demons. James van der Kolk says the body wears the scars. There's people that are stuck in unforgiveness, and they wonder why they're starting to get Alzheimer's at the age of 50. I've had a lady in my office that are unwilling to forgive, but when she drives, she can't even remember the road that she's supposed to drive on. But she's not willing to forgive. She's not willing to hear anything about that. Listen, sometimes the road out of being tormented by demons. I'm a Christian, I can't be tormented. Read the Bible. Is forgiveness. In actual fact, not forgiving, and I know it's a cliche, but I'm going to mention it. Not forgiving is poisoning yourself because you're mad at someone else. Hey, someone, can I let you know this life we live here is too short for you not to live in forgiveness. No, but Unico, I can't. Will that mean I'm not going to heaven? No, you'll go to heaven. But it's going to be one hell of a road for you. Because there's going to be tormentors on this planet that has legal right to torment you. Yeah, but Pastor, can't you come and drive all these demons out? No. I first work on healing and get you to do the stuff that takes away the legal right of the enemy before I address the enemy. Because then it's easy. If you close the doors in the spirit, the demon has no option but to go. You don't have to shout at it. You don't have to ask him what his name is. You don't have to gooi holy water. You can just tell him, man, in Jesus' name, go. And he will go. But I will never do deliverance on a person who's not a Christian and on a person who hasn't done the steps to become healed. Because then I invite back into your life stuff that's 7 times worse than the original. That's what the Bible says. So how do we forgive? Jo, ek klink ernstig vandag. I'm sorry, but man, we got to work and we got to live in a place where as children of God, we realize that this world is too tiny and this life on earth is too short not to forgive, man. I know life has maybe kicked you around and kicked you in the teeth, and it might have really sucked. But please forgive. I'm begging with you. Please forgive. Don't allow tormentors to come and work in your life. and stuff forever not being right in your life because you've given the devil legal authority and ground in your life. Please don't do that. Please live in freedom. Please live in freedom. I beg of you today. In fact, if we read the book of Hebrews, I think it's going to be on there. If we read the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 14 and 15, it says this: work at living in peace with everyone. This comes from the New Living Translation. Isn't that an amazing sentence? Before we go any further, living in peace with everyone takes work. Hello? It doesn't just happen. So the writer of the Hebrews tells the Hebrew folk, hey, work at living in peace with everyone. And then work on living a holy life. If you want to know how to be we all want to be a good Christian. If you want to know how to be a good Christian, there's two things you do. Work at living in peace with everyone and work at living a holy life. Easy. Why? Listen to this. For those who are not holy will not see the Lord. Man, this is a sermon for another day, and I'm going to preach this, but it's this verniet vir oggend. Listen, if you don't live a holy life, and you can't wonder, where is God? But if you live a holy life, you will see God pitch up in your life when you need it, and sometimes when you don't. You will see the Lord. But as I say, sermon for another day. Work at living in peace with everyone. Work at living a holy life. For those who are not holy will not see the Lord. Look after each other. Isn't that cool? Look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Now listen to this last sentence. This is a warning. It was a warning 2,000 years ago. It is still a warning today. Watch out. Isn't it amazing that the writer here uses those words? Watch out. It's as if it comes, slyly. Offense does. It comes ever so slyly to you, right? And then you suddenly just feel, wanneer ek na daai persoon kyk, like something just ain't right. And all of a sudden we can't look each other in the eye anymore. And all of a sudden we don't talk that much anymore. That's signs, right? Signs that you gotta watch out. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you. And that is what unforgiveness is and does. It grows a root of bitterness in your life, in your emotional life, and it will spill over to your spiritual life, and it will spill over to your physical life, and you will get physically sick because of it. Watch out that root doesn't take hold. Watch out. Hey, can I tell somebody? Watch out. Hey, can I beg with someone? Watch out. Watch out that it doesn't happen. Because it will trouble you. And the writer of Hebrews goes so far that it says it will be corrupting many. I've seen how unforgiveness corrupts people. I've seen how unforgiveness takes people to a place where they can't function without alcohol, or they can't function without having to pop a couple of pills, or where they can't function without getting into some or another addiction. And I can talk about addiction so much because we thought addiction is people just being weak. No, it's not. Addiction is people needing that crutch because there's something missing and wrong and not in place. So here we go. Number one, how do we forgive? Forgiveness is not automatic and it's not a magic wand. Forgiveness is a choice that we make. If you're making notes, write this down. Forgiveness is a choice. It is not dependent on the offender, and you don't need to wait for an apology. Sometimes that is exactly what we want. I want until he apologizes to me. I'm not going to talk. No. Forgiveness is not dependent on the person to apologize. If the person does, it's cool. If the person doesn't, we move on. It also has nothing to do with the person making amends. Forgiveness starts with us. It's a choice we make to let go. It's a choice to make to let go. Number 2, forgiveness chooses to see the good. Sometimes we have to realize that if the offense has already taken place, then God has already allowed it to take place. So what do? We learn to see the hand of God. We learn to see the hand of God. God will always turn whatever happens, if you allow Him to, into good. To those who love Him, to those who follow in His ways. Nothing can happen to you that God will not turn into good. No person can do anything to you that God will not turn into good. So you know what we need to learn to do? We need to learn to see the good in seemingly bad things. Number 3, forgiveness. I'm going to end with this. Forgiveness comes by the grace of God. No one of us, I want to go as far as saying, no one of us has the built-in natural tendency to want to forgive. No one of us. It comes by the grace of God. Comes by the grace of God. I want to tell you a story. I don't know who of you might have known of a lady by the name of Corrie ten Boom. Corrie ten Boom was a Dutch Christian, and she helped the Jewish people escape during the time of Hitler. During that time, she was also captured. She was also put in a concentration camp. She was also injured. She was also tortured. Her sister died because of torture in a concentration camp. If you want to do yourself a favor and you've got a bit of time, go and Google and read up on Corrie ten Boom. Anyways, the story goes that many years after release, she opened a church. She had a church and she was preaching, and one Sunday, one of her tormentors walked into the church. One of the people who injured her, who tormented her. It was a church service in Munich. This is her words. A church service in Munich that I saw him. The former Secret Service man who had stood guard at the tower or at the shower room in the processing center at Ravensbrück. He was the first of our actual jailers that I had seen since that time. And suddenly, it was all there. Suddenly she remembered, right? Suddenly it was all there. The room full of mocking men, the heaps of clothing, and her sister Betsy's painful face. So he came up to me as the church was emptying, beaming. And he said to me, "How grateful I am for your message." So obviously he didn't remember who she was. To think, and this was his words to her, so she probably preached on redemption, man. To think that, as you say, he washed my sins away. It was a church service in Munich that I saw him, the former Secret Service man who had stood guard. And in that moment, as I shook his hand, and everything came back, I was overcome by grace. That I know the price was paid for me. That I know the sacrifice was made for me. That I know I had to forgive. So I looked him in the eye. My voice quivered. And I said to him, "You don't know who I am. But in this day, God has allowed you to be on my path so that I can forgive you." Family, we can be happy, clappy, living and not really get to the stuff that makes us healthy. Not really get to the stuff that heals our hearts. It might be a family member, it might be a distant cousin, it might be someone that you met once. It might be an employer, it might be a fellow worker, it might be someone so close, your own father or your own child. It might be someone you really trusted. I mean, really trusted. That man, husband, or that wife that wasn't supposed to break your heart and break your trust. It might be the person that killed someone or hurt someone or injured someone close to you. It might be the organization that stripped you of your income. It might be the person responsible for you not realizing your potential. It might be any, all of, or none of that above. If you don't forgive, you're going to be stuck in this moment. It will be like Groundhog Day, perpetually waking up every day in the same nonsense. Or you can do the next hard thing, next difficult thing. The thing this man is today not only asking but begging of you. You can forgive. And let me tell you now, it's going to be the hardest thing that you might have ever done in your entire life. But let me tell you this as well. it's going to be so worth it. It's going to be so worth it. It is so freeing to start that journey. And let me give you the promise. And to wake up one day and feel that you're £1,000,000 lighter. And feel as if you can breathe. And feel as if the world isn't on your shoulders and your chest at the same time. That is the promise. And today I want to tell you, you are worth it. You are forgiving because you are worth being forgiven. You are worth stepping away from your tormentors. You are worth it. You are worth it. If you're watching this, you're worth it. If you're listening to this, you are worth it. So I implore you, make the call. Make the call. Forgive. Forgive. Abba, Father, Daddy, King of creation, God of all, the omnipotent, all-seeing Father of my heart and every heart in this house. I pray this morning that your Holy Spirit will now speak to our hearts, show us every circumstance, place, person that we need to forgive. Maybe we're going to need to write that down. And I pray, Lord, that we will forgive. I pray, Lord, that you will give us the courage and you will give us the character of person that we would walk in forgiveness. By the way, family, as your eyes just closed, how do you know that you've forgiven someone? The test is so easy. Let me give you the test. It's so easy. It's when you get to a day when you think of that person and there's absolutely no emotion there anymore. Then you know the person is forgiven in your heart. That's the test. So I implore you, be a people that forgive. Thank you.